everyone, this is Bisan from Gaza. I'm still alive, but a little bit sick. It's the fastest widespreading infection in the whole world. Yeah, it's crowded here, so this is normal actually. So today, Gaza municipality said that the Israeli war plans bombed and destroyed the central archive building that contained thousands of documents aged more than 100 years. Yani, they know actually what they are bombing. They do this intentionally, and now literally we don't have anything. The future is unknown, the present is destroyed, and the past is no longer our past. We don't know now anything about our city. And I used to make Hakawatiye, the storyteller program, and I used to talk in dozens of episodes about Gaza and the history of Gaza and everything about Gaza. And now they destroyed this place. Oh my God, how evil are they? How monsters are they? Yani, can you imagine that they are doing all these things to destroy the depth of us? Yani, Gahar, what does it mean, Gahar? Gahar is to make someone so sad. I don't know what does it mean in English. I don't know, but they're trying to Gahar us. I don't know. They're destroying our city, our lives forever, like forever. Just this. And by the way, today is the 29th of November. It's the International Day to celebrate of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And we're under bombing. The last day of the truce. It's not extended anymore. Incredible day. I'm so tired of this. I'm speechless. I can't even make a video talking about the situation. I'm just stuck. I'm stuck. Hey everyone, so I didn't post during the past couple of days because the truce gave me the chance to sit and think. Okay, yani, there is no bombing, there is no emergency, there is no ambulances everywhere around us in the hospital, so I can think now. And I had a chance also to see the footage that people who are still in the north are taken for the buildings and streets and everything. And start recognizing that even though, by the way, I lost the hope of a ceasefire, I lost the hope of returning to the north, but if that happened, what are we gonna do? Clean what? Rebuild what? I mean, there is no city. We need to start literally from before the scratch. We're gonna start from the infrastructure, then start building everything again. Everything. I mean, every place we loved, every place we memorize, the full image about our city and our life is now totally changed forever. It's not a matter of time. Nothing gonna be as it was before. Everything changed forever. Even the mentality of people, even how are they thinking, the way of living, their memories. They are reshaping our history, our society by destroying everything. They are reshaping all our lives, but we do not recognize this yet because we're still in the war. We're still in the middle of this storm. We didn't have the chance to brave, to think. And the occupation prime minister, is talking proudly about his strategy of not stopping the war, even if the hostages thing is done. What the hell do you want? Leave us alone, ya ammi. Leave us alone. Where أروح بحالي? Where to go? I don't know where to go. What is gonna happen? What's next? Next day, next week, next month, next year, what I'm gonna do in my life? I'm stuck. I feel that I'm stuck. I feel that this is the end. I'm done. I feel that خلاص, يعني, this is the new reality. You will die in the south. you will never see your home again, and you will never live a normal life again. I'm so tired of this. I'm speechless. I can't even make a video talking about the situation. I'm just stuck. I'm stuck.
مطر بتدخل علينا في الخيمة وما بنعرف ننام أبدا. فضاحت الخيمة. والله الحياة صعبة كثير.
Winter is coming. People are living in tents, and most of us are homeless. We don't have homes. So let's ask people and kids, how do they feel about winter?
بنحس بالبرد وبتدخل علينا المي بالليل. مش مدبرين حالنا خالص. البيوتنا ونصنا بيوتنا انقصفت وهربنا ما نلاقيش شيء. عشان الدنيا شتاء بنمرض لازم نلبس حاجات دافية.
بتحب الشتاء؟
يعني.
ليش يعني؟
لأنه بالدار بنتغطى مريح وبنزلش علينا مطر، أما بالخيم بنزل علينا مطر وبنغرق. والله بهدلة صرفت مطر علينا بالليل فضاحت الخيمة.
والله قلت الليل في هالموقف من ندفى لندفى نكب المي عن الشارع ايش بنعمل؟
مبسوط بالشتاء؟
السلام عليكم
انت بتحمل مين هالقيد؟
سارة محمد سارة بنتي. الله اكبر ولله الحمد. الله اكبر ولله الحمد. قصف الدار جيران كلها 9 استشهدوا من كانوا امنين. ارفع حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل يا شيخ.
كيف كانت
راسها فشلها راس راح راسها من الانفجار، انفجار الصاروخ طيارة. انا استشهدنا 4 بنتي هذه الطفلة سنتين. ومرتي وبنتي كمان 13 سنة وابني 13. نجيبهم كلهم نجيبهم مش كفن. رحمة الله عليكم يا آل صبور. طلعت اشوف شغلي الساعة 9 اشوف يعني اشوف رزق اولادي.
كان متوفر لهم اكل قبل ما يستشهدوا؟
ولا في اكل ولا في ناكل، والله العظيم ما عندنا طحين، والله العظيم باكل رز لي 3 ايام. هم اللي عملوا فينا هيك، هم اللي خلونا هيك. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل في اسرائيل اللي بتغصب الاطفال هذه، تقتل اللي بدها اياه، ايش بدها في الاولاد في الاطفال؟ ليش تقتل الناس اللي امنه في دورها؟ حسبي الله دول عقاب. ايش ذنب الطفله هذه؟ ايش ذنب مرتي يقتلوها؟ ماليش حدا، انا كلهم ماتوا، كل اولادي ماتوا. وينكم يا عرب وينكم؟ وين اخواننا العرب؟ وين المسلمين؟ اللي عملوا قمه عربيه، ايش عملوا في القمه العربيه والاسلاميه تبعيتهم؟ مش قادرين يدخلوا لنا اكل. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله.
تقريبا ضل 12 اسيره، وعن جد يعني بيستنوا كل وحده دورها بتلبس وبتستنى امتى تطلع. عن جد خالته هناك اذا بتسمعيني الله يفك اسرك، خالته خديجه، ام عاصم اللي من رام الله، قرى رام الله، اللي يعني عمرها 71 سنه. تخيلوا ياخذوا واحده عمرها 70 سنه ويذلوها، وجابوا حجه كمان عمرها 72 سنه وبدر العنف وضربوها وكسروها وهي مش عامله شيء. كل الصبايا بسجون الاحتلال بيعملوش ولا شيء، وهذا عن جد فضل كبير إلنا إحنا الأسيرات ونجد وقفنا مع بعض رغم إن العزل كتير صعب، وكنا ناكل أكل مش منهم المرة، والحمد لله رب العالمين طلعنا وقهرناهم للسجانين وقهرنا السلطة الإسرائيلية، وإن شاء الله الباقي كل الأسرى يا رب بروحوا. ورسالتي للأسرى إذا أنتم بتسمعوني عن جد، إحنا اليوم روحنا، أنتم بكرة بتروحوا، مش بكرة في بعده، ما فيش حد رح يضل بالسجن، وإن شاء الله كل الجرم تتفضى يا رب.
غزة يعني جريحة، ونطالب العالم يقفوا مع أهل غزة. يا عالم يا عربي، في شهداء تحت هذا الركام، تعالوا هان ابعتوا لنا معدات احنا نطلعهم، احنا مش قادرين نطلع الشهداء من تحت الركام.
لا مكان آمن ولا مكان يدفيك من البرد ولا أي حاجة تصلح للحياة.
شو عندنا إنه بيجي 10 أيام ما فيش مية، فيش أكل، فيش طحين، مقومات الحياة صعبة. يعني إحنا هنا منكوبين على الآخر، يعني إحنا هنا عايشين ومش عايشين، فيش ميه فيش شرب ما حدش بيطلع لنا.
اوكرانيا ما صارش فيها زي الحرب هذا. احنا ناس من طالب نعيش بسلام، احنا واليهود والعرب، احنا ما من لا دعاة حرب ولا دعاة مشاكل، احنا بدنا نعيش بامن وسلام زي شعوب العالم، زي وناخذ حريتنا واستقلالنا.
مصر مولعة، احنا مولعين، احنا مش طايقين اللي بيحصل، احنا ما بقتش تفرق معانا الحياة والموت، كلنا مشاريع شهداء من اجل فلسطين ومن اجل مصر، لكن في إدارة الأزمة تعالوا جمد العلاقات، استدعي السفير واطرد هذا الكلب خارج مصر، خد إجراءات عملية، احنا وراك، احنا وراك يا ريس، احنا وراك، ودي قضية حياة وموت بالنسبة لنا، من أجل مصر مستعدين كلنا نموت، إن شعار ما أخذ بالقوة لا يسترد إلا بالقوة هو الشعار الصحيح، هؤلاء مجرمين، هؤلاء قتلة.
لدينا اتفاق نحن نختلف معه، هو اتفاق مكمل للدولة المصرية، فإذا كان هذا الاتفاق لم يعد له محل من الإعراب فعلينا أن نمزقه من أجل الأمن القومي المصري والعربي. لا نستقبل لدينا فقط ما هو واجب إنساني ووطن، إنما فرض الأمر الواقع على دولة نازية هي رئيسة الاستعمار الماضي وحليف استعمار حالي، وهي حليفة كل استعمار لتصفية المنطقة، ومصر هي الجائزة الكبرى. هم كاتبين وقايلين هم عارفين بيعملوا ايه. هو اللي بيحدث في ليبيا بعزل عن اللي بيحصل كان في دارفور، عن اللي بيحصل مع سد النهضة. كل واحد إدارة واحدة. وأنا آسف أن أحدثكم للمرة العاشرة في هذا، وفي ظل تواطؤ إقليمي للأسف يسقط الكثيرون بتطبيع مذل. احنا موقعين الاتفاق من أكثر من 50 سنة، وهو ممزق في إيد الشعب المصري.
First 5 days of the temporary truce, 150 Palestinian prisoners who are really hostages have been liberated. But in that time, 168 Palestinians have been abducted by Israeli occupation forces. On Tuesday night in Palestine, they also included that since October 7th, 3,290 people have been arrested in the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem. And that number does not include those taken in Gaza by occupation ground invasion forces. There have been so many reports from eyewitnesses, including victims and journalists who have had their family members taken and used as human shields during the ground invasion in Gaza. I've covered it before, the abductions that aren't even counted in this 3,290 people. Yesterday, the Prisoners and Ex-Prisoners Affairs Commission reported since October 7th, 6 detainees have been martyred in prison. In total, as of November 28th, there are 8,540 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli occupation prisons. And finally, an open letter from the National Prisoners Movement on Wednesday evening regarding the retaliatory assault faced by prisoners in the jails of the Israeli occupation. Since October 7th, the Zionist enemy has begun its vengeful war against our Palestinian people in Gaza, the West Bank, and the prisons, in order to cover up the resounding defeat it faced due to the special military operation Al-Aqsa Flood, carried out by the Palestinian resistance against Zionist military sites around Gaza in support of Al-Aqsa, the prisoners, and in response to the enemy's ongoing crimes against our people. The Zionist occupation has committed heinous crimes against our prisoners in prison yards, simultaneously committing acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity against our people in Gaza and the West Bank, with international cover from the forces of evil and colonialism led by the United States of America. The Zionist aggression surpasses all criminals in history and the modern era with its crimes, representing the phenomenon of the new Nazis and the fascists in this world. Therefore, we wish to affirm the following. Firstly, we extend our utmost respect and admiration for our patient and struggling Palestinian people and their brave resistance in all parts of the homeland, particularly in the proud Gaza. Secondly, we call on the Qatari and Egyptian mediators, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the United Nations, and the countries of the free world to pressure the occupation to stop its vengeful assault and the systematic crimes it is launching against us in prisons, as the Zionist occupation has subjected us to dangerous detention conditions, transforming prisons into lethal iron graves, carrying out systematic assassinations and executions of prisoners, leading to the martyrdom of several. the Zionist jailers threaten us daily with more executions. They declare to us that they have instructions to kill us if we protest against the punitive measures against us. As we make this call to you, we do not ask that you free us from prisons. That is the task of the resistance, and it will take care of it. But until God grants us freedom, we ask you to stand by your moral, humanitarian, and international responsibilities to stop the occupiers' criminal acts against us, and to stop this Nazi fascist vengeful assault against us. Lastly, we express our pride and appreciation for the humane treatment of enemy prisoners by the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, while the occupation races against time to indulge in our blood, torment us, commit crimes against us in prisons, and the frantic efforts by many parties in the Zionist entity to pass a law for the execution of prisoners in the Zionist Knesset. And the Knesset is Israeli parliament, similar to the House of Representatives if you're in the US. I accessed this letter via Resistance News Network Prisoners Telegram page, and I encourage you to follow that page if you want updates on Palestinian prisoners.
It is November 29th. I have updates for today. If I miss anything, please comment it. Hamas has invited Elon Musk to Gaza to witness the destruction and the massacres committed by Israel. We invite him to visit Gaza to see the extent of the massacres and destruction committed against the people of Gaza in compliance with the standards of objectivity and credibility. Within 50 days, Israel dropped more than 40,000 tons of explosives on the homes of defenseless Gazans. Israeli forces continue to destroy homes in the raids in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. They have blown up homes, they have destroyed the roads and the water mains. Dozens of armored military vehicles as well as bulldozers have made their way into Jenin. 2 children have also been shot and killed in Jenin by Israeli terrorist forces. The 9-year-old was shot in the head and the 15-year-old was shot in the chest. In the past 24 hours, Israeli terrorist forces have illegally detained 35 Palestinians, including a 12-year-old child. Gaza City Mayor said that they are coming to an environmental disaster. With no fuel to operate generators, water pumps, and pump stations, they fear an environmental disaster will ensue. We have storm water mixed with wastewater. If this floods, it will cover many areas and it will get into people's houses, causing a very public health disaster. The mayor also noted that the damage around Gaza City is unbelievable. The extent of the damage by Israeli attacks is only just being discovered due to the truce. When we move around Gaza, we feel very angry and sad. We are discovering now how much damage has been inflicted on the infrastructure of the city, on cultural centers, libraries, and main public squares. Palestinians in Gaza are reporting being shot at by Israeli terrorist forces. We have been shot at. At the very least, we need to get our belongings and clothes from our homes so that we can protect ourselves from the cold in the shelter. Earlier today, we reported 2 shooting incidents amid the ongoing truce between Israel and Hamas. Israeli forces opened fire on a Palestinian boat as well as shelling the coast of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza at dawn. Civil defense teams are running into a lot of issues and having trouble removing bodies from the rubble. There is a lack of heavy machinery to help them. They said that even the people who are alive underneath the rubble, they're having a hard time getting to without some more heavy-duty equipment. 30 illegally detained Palestinians will be released today, including Ahed Tamimi. News reports have suggested that Israel might offer to pay off some of Egypt's vast public debt in exchange for allowing the forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza into Sinai. And I agree with this Egyptian photographer and storyteller of Bedouin descent. They state that this takes away the right of Palestinians to stay on their land while also promoting that Sinai is an empty desert for Palestinians to go to. It's not an empty desert. The Sinai Bedouins live in that desert, and their ancestors called that desert home. And it poses a major risk in the long run because let's say that Egypt agrees to allow the displacement of 2.3 million Palestinians into the Sinai desert. What if all of a sudden Israel says, oh, well, Hamas is now in the desert and starts massacring everybody there, including the Sinai Bedouin, once again displacing another indigenous group from their homeland and massacring another indigenous group in their homeland? And a lot of you will pose the questions, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just go to surrounding countries? Why won't surrounding countries just take all of them in? First of all, why should they have to leave? I mean, like it was just noted, this goes against the Palestinian cause if we are just displacing all Palestinians. And on top of all of that, I think most of us should be aware by now of the Greater Israel Plan, and that extends to Egypt. So if they push all of the Palestinians into the Sinai desert, this is just going to give them an excuse to yell Hamas and start massacring everybody there in order to stake their claim to the parts of Egypt that they want. This opens up a huge risk, and it shouldn't even be a fucking option that's on the table. Because, like we have said, it goes against the Palestinian cause. It goes against the liberation of Palestinians. They will never be allowed to return home again if they are displaced. They will never be allowed into their homeland ever again if they are forced into the Sinai Desert. I want you guys to keep all of that in mind when these questions get posed, when these articles come out, so that you aren't fooled, okay, by this idea of displacing people like it's a solution, because it's not. Remember to keep protesting, boycotting, and organizing, okay? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The US won't put conditions on the military aid being sent to Israel. 3 unnamed US officials said that trying to put pressure on Israel by limiting military aid is not something we're currently pursuing. The Biden administration keeps talking about an extension to the humanitarian pause, which, by the way, Israel is not abiding by. They continue to deflect when it comes to a ceasefire, a complete ceasefire, none of this bullshit humanitarian pause. And when Biden addressed the idea of conditioning aid to Israel, all he said was, it's a worthwhile thought. But like I told you guys a few videos ago, the economy in Israel cannot withstand continuing this genocide. It has already drained them in so many ways, and they're headed towards a crisis in regards to the economy. But then Israel's defense minister said in a post on X that Israeli forces in the air, on land, and at sea are ready to resume fighting. With what fucking money? It's very clear that they want to continue this genocide, and it's very, very clear that America is going to continue to fund it, one way or another, and without any conditions. And according to the Politico report, the US will not be using the substantial military aid it provides to apply any kind of pressure on Israel to negotiate, to limit civilian casualties, or allow more humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip. So basically, the US is going to hand them money, and they don't require anything on Israel's part. Nothing. They're not even going to use that money as any type of leverage to get Israel to stop what they're doing. They're just going to hand it over like it's fucking nothing. While we're all over here, consumed in debt, barely able to afford groceries, and our government doesn't even give a fuck. They're just handing it over. No conditions. Some members of the president's own Democratic Party have broken ranks with him on this issue, and protesters in the U.S. have demonstrated outside the offices of weapons manufacturers and blocked a ship carrying arms bound for Israel. What you are doing out there matters. You are literally shaking shit up in the government. You are causing a divide between people who are in the same party. I know that a lot of you are feeling like you don't know what to do next, and if what you've been doing has been making an impact, but it is. There's going to be a lot of people who are in the government. As this goes on, they're going to realize that we're not shifting our focus and that we're only getting angrier and angrier. We're getting more passionate. The more that we protest, the more that we show up, the more that we boycott, the more they'll have to listen. You can already see Biden clamoring to win any kind of points he can back, but it's too fucking late. He's lost it all. He will be known as Genocide Joe. That is who he will be in the history books. We are setting a standard with our reactions to this genocide. More than 20,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. Thousands have been illegally detained. And today, a 9-year-old Palestinian child was shot in the head by an Israeli terrorist. And here we are, still reading about how America is not going to use the money as leverage. They're not going to withhold the money. They're not going to put conditions on the money. They are just going to freely give it to a genocidal fucking maniac. Because those people in the American government that are allowing this to fucking happen, that are signing off on this, they're also genocidal fucking maniacs.
Let's talk about the youngest Palestinian hostage who is a part of the Israel-Hamas exchange deal. This is Abdulrahman al-Zughal, who is 14 years old and is also the only Palestinian who is on house arrest that is a part of this deal. In August, Abdulrahman went to go and get bread, and that is actually the last thing that he remembers before everything went blank. And why did everything go blank? Well, it's because the Israeli occupation forces shot him in the head 30 times and imprisoned him and accused him of throwing a Molotov cocktail at an illegal settlement. Again, they shot this 14-year-old boy 30 times. 30 times. He was in a coma for a week, and he was also pronounced dead multiple times within that week. He was absent during his trial because he was in the hospital for what they did to him, and they sentenced him to over 7 years in prison. Due to the occupation forces, he now has half a skull. His mother also said in an interview that she is incredibly thankful that he is back, but it's also really sad that it's come at the expense of the children in Gaza. There is no justification for what's happened to Abdul Rahman or any other Palestinian child, and a reminder that they're all tried in military courts, and the conviction rate is 99%. Abdul Rahman is currently in the hospital getting the medical care that he needs, so everyone wish him well and a speedy recovery. And may every single Palestinian hostage be free. Free Palestine. We need to talk about the bill that the United States representatives just passed last night in Congress. They voted 412-1 that Israel has a right to exist, and anyone who denies that right to exist is anti-Semitic. Rashida Tlaib voted present, which I'm assuming is because she's been censured on the Senate floor, so she was probably unable to vote, I think at least. Ilhan Omar voted yes. AOC voted yes. Ayanna Pressley voted yes. So we're seeing 3 out of the 4 members of the squad voting yes, saying that being against Israel is anti-Semitic. While 15,000 people in Gaza have been killed, and it's estimated that it's way higher than that, this is what we're focusing on. Yep. This is what the representatives are focusing on. Our representatives that we voted for are focusing on. While Palestinians in Gaza don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have their homes, they don't even have access to medical care. And this is what we're voting on. Sweet. And what's crazy about this whole thing to me is, again, how, they're conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, is when you have Jewish people all over this country that are protesting in the name of Palestine, that are saying, not in our name, not a genocide in our name. They are calling for a ceasefire. They're saying, we don't stand with Israel. Israel does not represent us. So when is the U.S. Congress going to actually start listening to, the people that live here? Quick question.
So some updates on what has been happening those past few days during the pause and the releasing of hostages. So as we know, the pause has extended for 2 more days, and today is the last day of this extension. There are negotiations about extending for 2 more days if there will be more exchanges for the hostages. So apart from that, the H group did something insanely smart yesterday. What is it? That the exchange of the hostages didn't happen in the south of Gaza, but they requested it to happen in Gaza City and the north of Gaza. Why? Because the past 50 days of these attacks on Gaza, Israel has claimed its full control on the north of Gaza and Gaza City. And that's where they have their tanks, their soldiers, everywhere, everyone on the ground. But the H group said, we are gonna release the hostages in Gaza City and in north of Gaza in front of everyone. And they came out with their full uniform, weapons, cars, everything in front of everyone. And the Gaza people were chanting for them and calling their names in front of the people, in front of the media and the press, and in front of the Israeli soldiers who are on the ground, and they couldn't find them for days. They came out with the hostages, gave them to the International Red Cross, and left back again. Why is that smart? Because they proved to the whole world that the past 50 days of attacks on Gaza were for nothing, and Israel didn't gain even one of their goals, and they were just unaliving civilians, and that still the H group is strong and stronger than before, and they still have their full team, full power, with weapons and everything, and they are ready for anyone.
This is a 24-hour update of what's been happening in Palestine. Despite the truce, there's been 2 reports of shooting, opening fire on a Palestinian boat, as well as shelling the coast of Khan Yunis in the last 24 hours. One of the reports of shooting was at Palestinians trying to return to their home in the south of Gaza. What kind of truce is this where Palestinians should still be fearful of being shot at? Israel has arrested at least 133 Palestinians from occupied East Jerusalem and occupied West Bank just over this truce period. That's almost the same amount of Palestinians released from Israeli prisons as part of this truce deal. The raids in occupied West Bank, specifically the Jenin area and the refugee camps there, have been continuously raided since this truce has started. The Israeli army have blown up 2 houses, destroyed roads and the water mains in Jenin. And then to add insult to injury, the army surrounded hospitals and blocked the work of medical teams trying to get to those who were injured. Most recently, 20 people have been rounded up in this raid on Jenin. It's reported that Hamas are working hard for an extension of this truce. And as Musk has been in Israel, Hamas invited Musk to visit Gaza to view the destruction for himself. During this truce, fuel has not been able to reach hospitals to make them operational, and field hospitals that were supposed to be set up are also not yet operational. And today the United Nations is observing International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. I have really mixed feelings about this. While it's amazing to see that Palestinian people are being recognised and their suffering being acknowledged on a global scale, the United Nations have been able to do nothing to stop their suffering, to stop this genocide.
I saw something that shook me to my core, and I just need to show you guys. The IOF never allowed the premature babies in the NICU of Nasser Hospital in the north to flee safely with their families. So instead, these babies died in their beds, most likely from starvation, lack of incubation, and care. And now they were discovered decomposing in their beds. I'm gonna say that again. The IOF forced these families to leave their premature babies behind, and they were found decomposing on their beds. Those babies never even got to start at life, bro. It is so cruel and inhumane and vile. I'm so tired of hearing about these 40 beheaded babies when it was only 1 baby killed and it wasn't even beheaded. But then y'all hear about these babies in the NICU that are decomposing because they were left without care. Y'all Zionists and pro-Israelis are not going to say anything about that? Admit it, it is disgusting and inhumane. How dare you say that you care about kids, but you're okay with that?
ستشاهدون الآن خطة رفض الجيش الإسرائيلي إخراجهم من هذه العناية لذلك اضطر الأهالي.
2 hours ago, Palestinians report being shot at in Gaza. They were visiting their destroyed homes in the Tal Hawa neighborhood south of Gaza City. One of the Palestinians said it was the 4th time he had tried to return to the area to inspect what remained of his home, and they've been shot at. Palestinians are saying that they need to get their belongings and clothes from their homes so that they can protect themselves from the cold in the shelter. Before this, it was reported that there were 2 shooting incidents amid the ongoing truce between Israel and Hamas. Israeli forces opened fire on a Palestinian boat as well as shelling the coast of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza at dawn. And just an hour ago, Israeli forces killed 2 Palestinian children in the West Bank. A 9-year-old was shot in the head and a 15-year-old was shot in the chest. Security and local sources told the Palestinian news agency Wafa that Israeli army forced the residents of Adam's neighborhood to leave their homes at gunpoint and destroy streets in their neighborhood. There's literally no Hamas in the West Bank. And there Israel goes again, violating the truce.
Here's a question: when will Israel stop lying? This is an Israeli child who was taken by Hamas as a hostage with her pet dog being released. And this is Muhammad Nazzal, a Palestinian child who was detained in prison by Israel with no charges and was part of the swap deal. He was released from Israeli prisons with broken arms and fingers.
ايش عملوا فيك؟ كسروا لك ايدك؟ ايدي واصبعي ومن هنا رضة وظهري وكل شيء. من دون سبب ولا شيء، بعد نص ساعة طلعوا طلعوا بعد ما كسرونا، وانا اشتر واحد كلت كتل فيها، وانكسر اصبعي وايدي.
It is not enough for Israel to break his arms and fingers. They posted a tweet from their official account with a video footage of Muhammad Nazzal completely healthy, claiming that Muhammad Nazzal is lying. The thing is, Muhammad Nazzal in his video interview has multiply said that his arm was broken a week ago and they refused to offer him medical care.
قدموا لك علاج اسعفوا؟
لا شيء.
ايش ولا شيء؟
ولا شيء، ما قدموا ليش ولا شيء.
طب هذا مين حط لك اياه؟
هذا الصليب.
هلا يعني؟
صار كم تصير اصبع مش قادر احركه وايدي.
من امتى انضربت؟
من اسبوع، وهس لما اجوا علي على الغرفه ردوا ضربوني.
كمان مره؟ وما قدم يعني انت العلاج هلا فقط اخذته؟
اخذته مع الصليب.
يعني اسبوع وايدك مكسوره وما قدم لك العلاج؟
ولا شيء. ما قدموا لي شيء.
So it's completely expected and logical to see Mohammed Nazal leaving the prison with no cast around his arms, nothing to indicate that he received any medical care. As you can see, he has no cast around his arms. And he said in the interview that the first medical care he received was on the bus by the Red Cross. And since the medical care he received on the bus is just first aid, his parents took him the next day to a hospital. And this is the medical report that they had. His full name and his ID number. And they even shared the x-ray, and this is his name and this is his hand. Another x-ray showing a metacarpal bone broken. Another image showing another metacarpal bone broken. It's not enough for Israel to systematically detain, imprison minors and children with no charges. Also beat them and torture them and broke their hands and deny it and claim that they are lying. And then turn to the Western media dehumanizing Palestinians, calling them savages and animals. No Palestinian child, woman or a man deserves to go through this. But that's what happens when you see a group of people lesser than animals.
انت من سجن النقب في صحراء النقب، وضع الأسرى كيف؟
وضع الأسرى موت، شو ختاير يبقوا على الأرض يدعس عليهم. يعني أنا شاب بتحمل أما همي. أنهم في وحدات القضاء القمعية بقتلوا، بنسوا شو الواحد بقتلوه قتيلة موت. شو الزلمة كبير عمره 70 سنة بموت على الأرض من القتيل. والله الحمد لله يا عمي، بركي على ربي وأنا أعيط وواضح. الحمد لله ربنا تعرف علينا الحمد لله. في واحد بالغرفة عندنا مات.
أسير استشهد؟ مين هو؟
ناسي اسمه وانا دق فيه طعمه طلع. نقب وضعه صعب.
انت من سجن النقب في صحراء النقب.
On November 29th, Israeli forces have unalived 8-year-old Airalo App and 15-year-old Basil Abu al-Wafa in Jenin. They also prevented citizens and paramedics from entering the Jenin refugee camp to help those injured. So while this is the 6th day of the temporary pause in Gaza, Israel continues raiding the West Bank and they have continued unaliving Palestinians. They have no regard for Palestinian lives.
So it's November 29th, the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, but if you've been following my content for the past few years, you know that I think critically about Palestine, and my goal here is to push people to do the same and to do their research when it comes to anything related to Palestine. As a Palestinian, I've never heard of that International Day of Solidarity before. Anyways, when you do a quick search, you get the United Nations page. And if you know me, you know that I will always criticize the United Nations. And here's what it says. In 1977, November 29th was declared as the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. That same exact day, November 29th, in 1947, the UN declared the partition of Palestine. And we know what happened a month or two right after November 29th in 1947. It was 1948, and that's what we call the Nakba. So this was the decision that led us to the Nakba. Now, if you've already created content about this day and things for Palestine related to this day, that's fine. Keep the content, maybe edit the caption so that it doesn't center, the International Day of Solidarity as much, but by all means, it's fine. Any educational information is good. Keep it because, I know that everyone who is posting about it already is an advocate for Palestine 24/7, but I think this is a very important example in real time of what we have been saying the past 50 days about these international institutions, about different governments, about the system that we live in, and about how we should be challenging power structures, how we should be the ones responsible for defining and undefining our suffering, how we should be the ones responsible for declaring which day we want to be the day of solidarity with the Palestinian, not take signals from the West or its institutions. And also just to remind you that the United Nations still calls Palestine the Palestine problem, instead of saying that Israel is the problem. It's not the Palestine problem, it's Israel's colonization problem. That's what the problem is. Don't call it the Palestine problem, and don't call it the question of Palestine. What do you mean the question of Palestine? You know what the question is, because you guys were responsible for why we got here.
For those of you who are not familiar with the Palestinian population in Illinois, most of the Palestinians are concentrated in a Chicago suburb called Bridgeview. So most of the homes are Palestinian owned, the businesses are Palestinian owned, the restaurants are Palestinian owned, both Middle Eastern and non-Middle Eastern. So you might go into a fast food restaurant and the owners are Palestinian. There's also a large mosque there where most of the people that attend are Palestinian. Bridgeview would be equatable to like a Dearborn or Patterson, New Jersey, but like, I'm gonna say it's nicer because I'm biased. And the main street that runs through this area of Little Palestine is called Harlem Avenue. That Starbucks that we got a few years ago that we were like so happy about is now for sale. Great corner location, South Harlem Avenue. I wonder why it's suddenly for sale. Could it be that the local population has decided that we don't want to spend our money supporting unethical companies? Perhaps, I think so. It's so funny because when I pass by this Starbucks, it's like the drive-thru is always empty. And good for us, good for all the people who are continuing to boycott and continuing to say not in our name. We are not going to spend our hard-earned money on companies who engage in unethical practices, such as supporting Israeli apartheid.
Zionists trying to convince people that the state of Palestine and Palestinians never existed because, look, they didn't create their flag until 1964 is literally a page straight out of the colonizers' playbook. And colonizers educate their masses in an effort to try to convince the masses that they had full ownership and claim to this land. So they'll say, look, we created our flag in 1948. They created their flag in 1964. So obviously we have full right and ownership to this land. And I want people to understand that the need and the necessity to create countries and borders and national anthems and flags only became a necessity because of colonization. If we look at India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, this used to be a subcontinent. It was not a country, it was a subcontinent. And it was made up of kingdoms, okay? Because of colonization, countries had to be made. So India didn't create a flag until 1947. Pakistan didn't create a flag until 1947. Bangladesh didn't create a flag until 1972. If we look at America, America was made up of tribes. The Navajo Nation didn't create a flag until, I believe, 1968. Nigeria, also another country that was made up of tribes. They didn't create a flag until 1959. So does that mean that colonizers had full right to come and claim their land? Like, I want people to understand, like, the way colonizers argue, it's from a colonizer's standpoint. It's from a book that was written by colonizers. And the need to create borders, the need to create flags and national anthems. These are all things that became a necessity because of colonization.
A lot of people have been commenting about wanting some kind of an update about Reem's grandpa, and here it is. And just a reminder for those of you who don't know who Reem's grandpa is, he was a Gazan grandpa who lost both of his grandchildren and his child in the airstrikes in Gaza. And he was talking about Reem while he was saying his last goodbyes, and he called her the soul of his soul. And this is our beautiful little baby Reem. So here's the update. Grandpa went back to the house that he lost almost his entire family in. And as he was sitting amongst the rubble of what remains of his house, this little cat came in to say hi to him. And it turns out that this stray cat was kind of a little friend of Reem and Tariq, and she used to come and visit them and play with them on a daily basis during the war in Gaza. And the second he returned to the house, the cat came running in, ran into his lap, and of course started showing him affection because he had been missing for a few days, and the cameras just so happened to catch him and the cat's interaction. And they asked him about the cat, and he said, this is Reem and Tariq's little friend. She used to come to the house every single day, but I guess now she's coming to give her condolences for Reem and Tariq. And the most heartbreaking part of this image and that video is while the cat is completely cuddled up in this man's lap, right on the floor in front of him is one of Reem's old little shoes. So as this grandpa mourns the loss of his grandchildren and his daughter, he's sitting amongst the rubble in what used to be his home, and the only thing that has come to give him some kind of solace and show him some kind of love and mourn with him is his grandchildren's little pet.
I think that a lot of people need to sit with their ideas regarding peace and what peace really means to them. I'm largely unimpressed with the accusations of Palestinians that we are not a peaceful people. There's a lot to unpack there, not least of which is the Orientalist idea that we are savage and barbaric. I hear this idea or this subtle accusation that Palestinians reject peace. But the thing is, a lot of people are referring to a version of peace that existed on October 6th. It's a version of peace where perhaps bombs aren't dropping, or perhaps more importantly, we aren't inconveniencing you with the knowledge of our genocide on social media. But really what you're talking about is maintenance of the status quo, not peace. Because peace never existed under apartheid. When you ask for an October 6th version of peace, I ask you peace for whom? It wasn't peaceful for people living under a decades-long siege in Gaza. It wasn't peaceful for Palestinians in the West Bank who were being shot at by settlers. It wasn't peaceful when the courts were trying to evict the families in Sheikh Jarrah from their homes. Your objection is not that there is no peace. Your objection is now there is no peace for people other than Palestinians. But really, no such peace ever existed. For all of its power and resources, Israel has only ever been able to offer a veneer of peace. It's because the only way to achieve peace for Palestinians and for Israelis is through justice. And there is no justice on stolen land. There is no justice as long as there is a Western-installed apartheid settler colonial occupation. That's why I think it's so embarrassing when I hear the words ceasefire and peace in the same sentence. A ceasefire is not peace. A ceasefire is a pacifier for you, for a Western audience. We will only ever achieve peace, real peace, a peace that lasts, through justice. The question you should not be asking is, how do we stop the fighting? How do we extend the ceasefire? The question you should be asking is, what does justice look like for the people who are living there? Because yes, of course, the violence in the forms of bombs and bullets must stop, but so must the violence that is inherent to the Zionist project. The violence of siege and colonization and ethnic cleansing must be addressed too. If you do not address those things, peace is not what you desire. What you desire is for Palestinians to go back to dying slowly and quietly without you having to pay attention to it. It is such an absurd and dehumanizing accusation that Palestinians do not want peace. We are human beings. Of course we want peace. We want to live on our land and raise our families in a safe place, just like everyone else. But only justice will bring peace. And I hope you humanize Palestinians enough to ask them the question, what does justice look like for your people? It is only through answering this question that we will obtain peace. And it is a much better question than why won't you savage Arabs stop fighting? No justice, no peace. And I hope you'll consider that sometimes what you've been told is peaceful is not peaceful at all.
You know who is scarier than a Zionist? Someone who pretends not to be one. And I'm seeing them a lot in the mental health community. They're the ones that are like, I believe that Palestinians should not suffer. And in the same vein be like, but do you condemn Hamas? They're the ones who use love and light to deflect around like, I just don't get into politics. Basically the ones that try to silence you with their mental health jargon, their trauma jargon, their spirituality, their faux spirituality, because it's this insidious, manipulative, covert messaging that we really need to pay attention to. Because now it's very easy to spot a Zionist who's very proud to be pro-Israel, but it's these both sides, whataboutisms kind of people. These are the people that are weaponizing their empathy for all humanity to make us believe that they don't have a stance.
If wanting the empires to fall and wanting liberation for all oppressed people
means that I am a radical, then yes, absolutely, unequivocally, proudly, I am a radical. Moderation, reform, status quo, all not working, and those are all trying to work within the system, and we don't want the system. So radical it is. And liberation, just so you know, because we must envision what it will be, means protest, friction, resistance, disobedience, clashes, dismantling, toppling, rebellion. And yes, liberation also means to be radical. Become radicalized against oppression. Become radicalized. We need more of us. So don't be afraid. Be fearless. Are you a radical? Yes, I am a radical. I'm here to tear all of the empires down. I am here for the liberation of every single being. I'm here for abolition and indigenous stewardship of the land, for transformative healing and generative work. I dedicate and give my life to taking down empires and fighting for liberation for all. So radical it is.
Hi Pookie, so since today's the Global Day of Solidarity for what's happening to the people of Palestine, let's talk about this. So first of all, I want to say the fact that you think only 5,000 Palestinians have died in this whole conflict lets me know that you are not equipped to have this conversation, but we're going to have it anyway. Okay, my love, so for reference, Palestine has been under apartheid for 75 plus years, right? This did not start on October 7, 2023, as much as a lot of people want you to think that. Secondly, as of like 2 days ago, 20,031 people were killed by the Israeli forces, and that is since October 7th. That is not over the span of the 75 years. So we're talking in 50 days, 20,000 people gone. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Google and define what genocide means. I don't know about your Google, but mine says the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a specific nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Since you stay up Netanyahu's ass, you should know that he said he plans on turning Gaza into a deserted island. Yes, what happened in the 1940s in Germany is comparable to what's happening now. The only thing Netanyahu needs is time to reach that 6 million number. Jewish people said never again. They meant to anybody.
Here's the frustrating thing as a Palestinian diaspora. My grandparents were born in Palestine. So were their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents. I think you get the point here. My mother was born in Jerusalem, but my father's family was forcibly displaced in 1948, forcing him to live in Kuwait City. And now me, as a 19-year-old Palestinian living in diaspora, I have less of a right to visit my homeland than a random Jewish person in Brooklyn, New York. I have only ever gone to Palestine one time in my entire life when I was 13 years old. It was actually on my 13th birthday that I was able to visit my home village in Nablus, where my grandfather was born and where his friends and families all lived for many, many generations. And now, in 2023, a random white person living in Brooklyn, New York has more of a right to visit Israel and live there than I do. Simply because they are Jewish, they have more of a right to go to my country, even though they've never been there before, even though their parents never been there before, even though they've never stepped foot on Palestine ever before. But due to a racist Israeli law, Jewish people are the only ones that have a birthright to Israel. But the millions of Palestinians that were forced out of their homes in 1948, including myself and my family, are not allowed to return. Even though right now I can count 8 generations back of my family that lived in Palestine. How is it that this sort of Jewish supremacist racist law exists and people still don't see Israel for what it is? A violent settler colony that exists at the expense of native Palestinians. Native Palestinians like myself who are still waiting till this day to finally be able to return home. It's not an exaggeration to tell you that our every thought, our every breath dreams of returning to Palestine. For Palestinians, resistance exists in every part of our lives. Every time we share a laugh or a cry, we share a meal or a moment of joy, resistance lies between our breath. Resistance is the only thing that allows us to be human or share any sort of human experience. And one day, inshallah, Palestine will be free. We will return to our villages and our cities. We will rebuild them from the ground. And then we will tell our grandchildren about a time where Palestine was fighting for its right to exist.
I just think it's really interesting how effectively ships and sea travel is being weaponized against Israel right now. Obviously, you have the Yemenis and the Somali Coast Guard seizing Israeli ships, and that's very beneficial because A, obviously it stops those ships, but B, it also discourages Israeli ships from moving outside of Israeli waters. But part of the reason that this is also so effective is because Israel has made it impossible for other nations to step in and help them in terms of international waters. When the Somali Coast Guard seized that ship, there were 2 Chinese military vessels in the vicinity that didn't do anything to help that ship when they could have, because Israel has alienated itself so badly. The US has military vessels there, but they are not willing at this moment to allow Israel to draw them into a broader international conflict. And so they also didn't step in to help. It kind of reveals that one of the key strategies to dismantling these illegitimate states is A, the enemies are provoked to attack, and B, the neutral parties, the regulators, and even the allies are not convinced that they can or will step in to defend. Then you have countries like Indonesia and Turkey sending ships full of aid to the Gaza Strip in defiance of Israel's blockade, sort of daring Israel to target those ships, because if they do, that then launches, again, international warfare that we are pretty sure the United States is not going to back, at least not going to back as full-throatedly as would be necessary. It's just very fascinating that you've got these bigger countries who are going to try to break the blockade on the Gaza Strip, and then these smaller countries that are simultaneously essentially announcing their desire to enforce a blockade on Israel. And ultimately, this is the kind of action that actually breaks illegitimate states.
Now more than ever, it is so important to be intentional with our language. Please stop saying that what is clearly a genocide against Palestinians today is complicated. When you say that it's complicated, it really just makes us feel like Palestinian lives are not important enough for you to uncomplicate it. You can say that you are intentionally being confused by other people, but that does not mean that it is complicated. You can say that the history feels inaccessible, but that does not mean that it is complicated. You can say that the media outlets are clearly misinforming you. That does not mean that it is complicated. You can say that you feel afraid of the backlash of speaking out, but that does not mean that it is complicated. Genocide is not complicated. Occupation is not complicated. A clear violation of war crimes is not complicated. Please use your voice. Please speak up.
Hey guy, what's with the long face? I'll tell you. According to Hebrew Channel 13 News, the Prime Minister of Israel requested a meeting with the family of an Israeli captive that was recently released. He was rejected. That's an indicator, if there ever was one, that not only is he losing the conflict in Gaza, he's also losing the support of Israelis. But we already knew that. Free Palestine.
I don't know if y'all have heard, but Henry Kissinger died, and before liberals start memorializing him for everything he did, let's remember that he was a war criminal. So let's go through some of his crimes, shall we? He orchestrated a military coup in Chile. If you don't know about this, I am happy to recommend books about it because I think it's important that people conceptualize and really put together the history of orchestrating coups by the United States in other countries and the harm that does. He did a lot of harm in Latin America. So he gave the green light to the Argentinian dictatorship's murderous crackdown, and thousands were kidnapped, tortured, killed. And he told General Suharto, it's important that whatever you do succeeds quickly. And then the absolute war crimes he committed expanded in Southeast Asia when he expanded the war in Laos and Cambodia, pushing for bombing anything that moves. That's what he said. About 2 million Vietnamese people died, killed. War criminals love carpet bombing, so he carpet bombed Cambodia indiscriminately, claiming they were unpopulated areas. This thread does a really good job of summing it all up. So I shared this thread to also say that as you see liberals try to memorialize him, to kind of whitewash his legacy of crimes as a public servant, remember that this recipient of the 1973 Nobel Peace Prize was a war criminal, and that is how he should be remembered. It's pretty common to give war criminals the Nobel Peace Prize.
News telling lies, check the facts that they cover, cause my people out here crying, or they dying, or they suffer. And just notice for my people up in Gaza and Ramallah, and it's free Palestine until it's backwards, motherfucker.
Free Palestine, this is the sound of a war. Can you hear me scream? Oh, why can't you see? How much more do we need to bleed? We're children and we're fighting, can't get rid of us. You know we stand our ground, we won't back down, this land is ours. Free Palestine, this is the sound of a war and a cry for peace.
Cause I know that everyone knows it's time to take Palestine back this time.
شامي ليالي رويلي للدين شامي ليالي رويلي لو علي ليلالي بواب حلول تفتح شامي ليلالي رويلي لو واني الليلة لبعت معي ليل الريح الشامي ليلالي رويلي لو يا سيلي روي دور ليلي لي حلال حبيلي لا بايا رويلي لو.
Money for Israel's crimes. No more money for Israel's crimes.
Day 3 of hunger strike for ceasefire in front of the White House. Today is November 29th. It is the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. So what we've got going on here today is environmental justice. Tomorrow we've got Black Palestinian solidarity. Yesterday we had Jewish solidarity. And then we've got labor coming up later in the week, along with some other wonderful things. Right now there's a bunch of students here that are participating in the Tears for Palestine. This practice originated in Japan, and essentially each of these tiers will symbolize one of the Palestinian lives taken by U.S.-funded Israeli airstrikes in front of the White House. We've also got some folks here that are holding a die-in. Each of these body bags has the name of a Palestinian child who has been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Over 8,000 children, over 15,000 Palestinians in total, over 8,000 of those being children.
Don't forget that it's not just about free Palestine, but the Palestine that's freeing us along the way.